Thank you for joining in on our journey through the 10 Commandments called 10 Commandments in 10 Weeks. And we're up to week number 6 and commandment number 6. And the commandment number 6 is you shall not murder. And that is actually the entire verse, you shall not murder. And so before we get into this study here tonight, looking at the 6th commandment, let's do a very quick overview of the first 5 commandments, what we've looked at so far, and these are explained a lot more in detail in the previous sessions here. So the first commandment, Exodus 20 verses 1 through 3, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. This commandment demands a belief in God, belief in one God, belief in the one true God. It demands inward loyalty and outward allegiance, and we talk about that in previous weeks in more detail. The second commandment, no graven images or idols. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath the waters below. And so the lesson we gained out of this was to be careful to never substitute the one true God for any man-made thing. Man-made objects, man-made traditions, man-made philosophies, man-made experiences, and whatever God creates, whatever God is, the devil will come along and make a counterfeit version of that. And that's all idols are just simply a counterfeit version of the things of God or of God himself. So that's the third. Then we bring us to the third commandment, which is do not misuse God's name. And I'll read here in Exodus 27, you shall not misuse, or we use that phrase, take in vain. Some translations have that, take in vain the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. And so there are several ways that we can take God's name in vain, by speaking God's name disrespectfully, by cursing the name of God, by disobeying God's instructions in worship, that is idol worship, or cutting corners as some of the people in the Old Testament did. Also, by making false claims in God's name. This would be false prophets. If you're speaking on behalf of God, claiming to, and you're making false claims, intentionally doing that, you're taking God's name in vain. And then by failing to represent the Lord in a fitting manner. We carry the name Christ with us as Christians. And so wherever we go, we need to make sure that our actions do not take the Lord's name in vain. And so that brings us to the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And Exodus 28 through 11. And so here are some things to keep in mind. Now this is the only commandment, the only one of the 10 commandments that are not explicitly repeated in the New Testament as a command for Christians. So every one of these commands are repeated again in the New Testament as a command for Christians. This one is not, in that we are not required in the Christian age to observe the Sabbath on Saturday as the people of Israel were required to do in the Old Testament times before the time of Jesus. So here are some things to keep in mind. All right, so even though Christians are not required to observe the Sabbath as the Jews did in the Old Testament, there are some ideas and principles believers should remember. First of all, Christians are instructed to meet regularly. In Hebrews 10:24, don't get out of the habit of meeting together, as some don't fail to meet together as some are in the habit of doing. Christians are also we also see that the pattern of the earliest Christians was to meet on the first day of the week. They met regularly. It didn't mean they just didn't do anything, but they met on the first day of the week for the breaking of bread, and it seemed to be the pattern of the early church. And most people think that this is in connection with the fact that Jesus rose from the grave on the first day of the week. So then Jesus modeled taking regular time to rest. It says that Jesus often went off by himself to pray. There was a time when we found that he was napping in the bottom of a boat during a storm. And so he would take time to rest and recharge his batteries. And then we see here that Jesus is described as a Sabbath rest. He himself is a Sabbath rest for his people. So he declared himself as Lord of the Sabbath. He's over the Sabbath. And then in Jesus, we find the ultimate rest and refreshment. And so then that brings us to the fifth commandment: honor your father and mother. Honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Here's some ways we honor our parents: through obedience. Mostly that's when we're younger, through obedience to them, through respect as we get older, and of course any age we show respect, through encouragement, just like we would encourage any brother or sister in Christ, and then through provision. We need to provide for our family what they need, whether it be physical needs or whether it be helping them just navigate daily life. Now, this is a command with a promise. It says, honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. So is this a promise that what does it mean if somebody has there ever been a person that has done it right, they've obeyed their parents, they've been good to them, but then they died young? Some people say, well, wait a minute, is the Bible not keeping its promise, or is the Bible contradicting itself? And so how do we do this? This command here, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. So this promise here, the promise of this long life, is aimed more at civilization than at individuals. Notice it says, you will live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. So what he's saying here is that the family is the cornerstone of civilization. And if you don't have respect and honor within your family, that unit is going to fall apart, and then you're going to fall apart, and your nation is not going to last long in the land your God's giving you. Now, it could also apply on an individual matter, because when we listen to our parents and we heed their advice to stay out of danger, we generally will live longer. And a lot of times men, when they heed the advice of their wives, will live longer too. But that whole idea, it's a command, it's this general promise there. So that brings us to commandment number 6. The sixth commandment, you shall not murder. And I didn't have the verse re-quoted there because that is the verse. You shall not murder. 4 words with a lot of meaning. And so we'll go through a few things here in our outline here that you can fill out here. So what is this really pointing to here? So the first thing we'll talk about is the sanctity of human life. So a river is purest at its source. And so let's go back to the source of human life, Genesis 1, 26 through 28. This is on the 6th day of creation. All right, this is the crowning achievement of creation. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And then, if you look in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, this is at the end. At the other days, it said God looked at what he made, and it was good. Then it says God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. So here is the main point here, if you want to write this down on your outline. Because people are made in God's image, human life is inherently sacred and worthy of protection. All right? Human life is inherently sacred and worthy of protection. So this is the heart behind this commandment here. All right, so to get a little better understanding of what this command means, I think it's important that we get some clarity on exactly what it means when it says, you shall not murder. Now, there are some Hebrew words, there are different words Some of your translation might say, you shall not kill. So there are different Hebrew words for kill versus murder. Now, I'm not going to try to pronounce these, but you can see here on the screen that you have two Hebrew words. One means to put to death. The other means to murder. You have two Greek words. One means to put to death or kill. The other means to murder. So, what do we make of this? So, what do you think? Which one of these words do you think is used in this 10 Commandment? Well, it's that first word there, that rachaka, which means to. That mut, which means to murder. It says so. The best translation would be to use "you shall not murder." So that brings us to this. So murder, let's define that, would be intentionally killing someone without justification. All right? So intentionally killing someone without justification. So this is where people kind of stumble over this command a little bit. We get into the what-abouts. Well, what about this and what about that? So I'm going to try to answer some of those what-abouts. And so first of all, this command does not call for a complete ban on the taking of another human life. It's a tragic thing when that happens, but the Bible does not absolutely call for a complete ban or a complete moratorium on the taking of another human life. So when is it okay? When is it allowed to take another human life? Of course, nobody wants to do that or be a part of that. So there are two instances in the Bible that allows where the Bible allows for killing. So one is capital punishment. So what is the background of capital punishment? Well, we go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. You have Cain and Abel. Let me just read that. This was the first murder, okay? You shall not murder. So now, so Cain killed his brother Abel, and what was his punishment? His punishment was this. God said, now you are under a curse, and driven from the ground, which opens its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. But the Lord said to him, not so. Anyone who kills Cain must suffer vengeance 7 times over. Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So you'll notice here, the first murder was not answered with capital punishment. He was given a punishment, but it was not capital punishment. Now later on, in that same chapter, there was another ancestor, descendant, another descendant, Lamech, Cain's descendant, also commits murder. And so Genesis 4:23 through 24, I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 70 times 7. No record of Lamech being killed for his crime or anything like that. We don't have capital punishment. Well, where do we come up originally with this idea of capital punishment? Well, there is a new command after the flood. So in Genesis 6, that's the account that begins of God approaching Noah to build the ark, and then God floods the entire earth, and 40 days, 40 nights was the rain, and then it was, just a long period on that boat. And then you get to Genesis chapter 9, and there's a new arrangement here. Genesis 9, beginning in verse 3. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. So up until this time, they were vegetarians or vegans, I guess. So everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each human being too. I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God created mankind. So it's kind of interesting here. This is where we see God introduces capital punishment at this time. And understand too, this is after the entire earth had become so wicked that all they could do, all of humanity thought about nothing wicked. They thought about nothing but sin and wickedness all the time. So now then after this, we have a clarification in the time of Moses. So this is after the Ten Commandments. This is where they're making some more clarifications on the do not murder. Okay, so let me read. This is a long passage, Numbers chapter 35, 16 through 25. I'm sure most of you have this memorized already, but I'll go ahead and read it here. If anyone strikes someone a fatal blow with an iron object, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. Or if anyone is holding a stone and strikes someone a fatal blow with it, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. Or if anyone is holding a wooden object and strikes someone with a fatal blow with it, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death. When the avenger comes upon the murderer, the avenger shall put the murderer to death. If anyone with malice aforethought shoves another or throws something at them intentionally so that they die, or if out of enmity one person hits another with their fist so that the other dies, that person is to be put to death. That person is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when they meet. Now, the avenger of blood would have been a relative of the person who was killed. That's the avenger of blood, all right? So verse 22, but if without enmity someone suddenly pushes another or throws something at them unintentionally, or without seeing them, drops on them a stone heavy enough to kill them, and they die, since that person was not an enemy and no harm was intended, the assembly must judge between the accused and the avenger of blood according to these regulations. The assembly must protect the one accused of murder from the avenger of blood and send the accused back to the city of refuge to which they fled. The accused must stay there until the death of the high priest who was anointed with holy oil. So they had made arrangements and a distinction between killing somebody by accident, which was just an accident, or killing somebody outright with enmity premeditated there. So there's the idea. So first of all, capital punishment, the taking of a human life, is allowed according to the biblical narrative here by God. So the second area where killing is allowed, and that would be in some instances of war. When you're a soldier, there are times when war is maybe not a good thing. Of course, it's always a tragic thing, but there's sometimes when war is not a just thing. Perhaps whether it's imperialism or financial gain or just family feuds or racial arrogance or something like that. But let's look here at, so when God had the Israelites come into the land of Canaan, he had them fight the people of Canaan. What he had to do, they had to wipe them out. This was warfare. He had to wipe these people out. And so notice here the heart behind this. This is interesting here. Deuteronomy 9, 1 through 6. It says this: Hear, Israel, you are now about to cross the Jordan to go and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities that have walls up to the sky. The people are strong and tall, Anakites. You know about them and have heard it said, who can stand up against the Anakites? But be assured today that the Lord your God is the one who goes across ahead of you. like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you, and you will drive them out to annihilate them quickly, as the Lord has promised you. After the Lord your God has driven them out before you, do not, here's the key part here, do not say to yourself, the Lord has brought me here to take possession of this land because of my righteousness. No, it is on account of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is going to drive them out before you. So you see here, it wasn't just there was this nation minding their own business, doing nothing wrong. God was using Israel to judge the sin of these nations here. It is not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you're going to take possession of their land, but on account of the wickedness of these nations. The Lord your God will drive them out before you to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. So I think it's interesting at the end, you're a stiff-necked people. So he's just giving it to you, so just don't get, a term I heard growing up, don't get too big for your britches. Maybe you've heard that term before there. So there's another question. It's the idea of war. And sometimes there are instances in war, and there's sometimes in war where one nation is protecting another nation. And so that would be a time there. So you're taking a life as a soldier. Even in the New Testament, I think it's in Romans 13, where the Apostle Paul talks about a soldier, if he does not carry the sword in vain. And God has anointed soldiers or ordained that they exist. And there was never a time that Jesus or any of the apostles had an interaction with a soldier and said, okay, if you're going to be a follower of mine, you need to decommission yourself from the military and no longer fight in wars. They were never told that in this. So here's another question that comes up. What about when God takes a life? Now, he sent the Israelites into war in Canaan and all these different places. But what about when God takes a life? Well, let's think about the flood. He took a lot of lives then, didn't he? All except for 8. Those were on the boat. And then there was Sodom and Gomorrah. So the flood, the earth was destroyed. I'll just read to you from Genesis 7, 21 to 23. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swam over the earth, all mankind, everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils, every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and creatures that moved along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. So you had, the whole world wiped out there. Then there was Sodom and Gomorrah, and except for Lot's family, except for Lot's wife, who turned around and turned into a pillar of salt because she was told, don't look back, but she did anyway. But Sodom and Gomorrah, they were completely destroyed. I mean, just burnt to the ground, and the ashes stirred around, or, I'm adding on a little bit there, but I mean, it was horrible. I mean, it's just wiped out. You think about these hurricanes down in Fort Myers that's just happened here recently, just nothing but a foundation left. I imagine that's what it was there, what God did, and he just wiped them out. So there's some things to remember when God takes a life. Some things to remember. First of all, we got to remember that God is a sovereign God. So God is the creator of all life. He created it, so he has the right to dispense with it as he sees fit. Now, let's just say that I decide I'm going to become a person that makes a guitar, and I get in my shop and I create a guitar. I could never do that. And then I get it all done, and I decide with my guitar, okay, I'm just going to take it, I'm just going to slam it and kill it. Well, I could do that. I made it, God is sovereign, and he can do that. So God is a sovereign God. He's the creator of all life. He has the right to dispense with it as he sees fit. He creates it. He can do what he wants to with it. Now, he is but that brings us to the next one of these, and that is the fact that God is a just God. So, yes, he's sovereign. He can do whatever he wants to do. He doesn't have to ask permission. But God gives plenty of warning before his judgment. Think of Noah. You know, the Bible tells us that Noah preached for how long? 120 years. I can't imagine. I've been here at the Heath Church of Christ for 35 years. Man, that's just a little start there, isn't it? I imagine Noah would look at me, you whippersnapper, but so 120 years. That's a long time to warn people, isn't it? Yeah. And then Sodom and Gomorrah. Did God just come along and go, zap, that's it? No, this has been, so you might remember there was a time when Abraham bargained with God or prayed, had the interaction with God on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he said, Lord, if there are 50 righteous people here, won't you save the city? And the Lord said, oh, yes. If there are 40 righteous people, he just keeps counting them down. 40, 30, he gets all the way down to 10. And so what we learn from that is that God is just here. He is not just out killing for no reason. He's not like some guy who would make a guitar and just smash it for no reason. He's not impulsive or impetuous or something like that. And then the last one here, God is a merciful God. He provides an escape for those who will obey. You might remember the Battle of Jericho and remember Rahab, where God provided a way of escape for her because she was obedient and helped God's people there. Noah and his family were saved. They were obedient. They built a boat in the middle of nowhere. And then Lot and his family, with the exception of Lot's wife, escaped God's judgment because they were obedient. They ran away as God instructed. So now we're coming down to the last part of this. And this is the spirit of the law. And so here's the thing that Jesus did. Jesus said, I have not come to abolish the law. Because the Ten Commandments are the law, right? Or part of the law. I have not come to abolish the law. I have come to fulfill the law. And so, his great sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, he always says, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you. Let's see what he has to say about murder here. Matthew 5, 21 through 22. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. So, here's what Jesus is teaching here. The very act of murder is rooted in an angry and murderous spirit. So, and then he says, what's this whole idea about saying Raka or saying you fool? We were reading this passage this morning in our men's study, and I thought to myself, well, that Mr. T, he's in real trouble here. Well, we're not talking about just kind of using that term like kind of in that goofy way like that. This is looking at somebody with contempt and saying you are worthless. Now, in the Mr. T thing, I pity the fool. He's calling them out and just saying, hey, don't be foolish, don't act. And think about all of the book of Proverbs. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. The foolish man does this. The fool does this. So what Jesus is saying, it's about showing contempt here. A murderous spirit, and I think I have, a murderous spirit can arise when one allows contempt to fester in one's heart. So if you're just allowing contempt to fester in your heart, that is a murderous spirit. Just the same as Jesus said, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I say don't lust. A lustful spirit leads to adultery. A contemptuous spirit, a spirit of hate, leads to murder eventually. So that's the spirit. So in essence, this term of that's to say you fool or Raka, actually was a term of contempt, wishing that someone would just go to hell, is basically what Jesus is referring to there. So here's some concluding remarks here. for us to remember for this command, do not murder. First thing is this: human life is set apart from the rest of creation. We are different, all right? And we are different. Now, some of you are looking at me and saying, yeah, he's different, all right. But that's not what I mean by that. We are set apart from creation. In all of the other days of creation, God said, it is good. After he created Adam and Eve, God said, it is very good. We are created in the image of God. We are set apart from the rest of creation. So because of that, human life has intrinsic value. And so this is the debate you see over abortion or pro-life or pro-choice and those things. And I realize there are some painful scenarios that we enter into when we have those discussions. But from a biblical standpoint, we must start from the idea of that human life has intrinsic value. Now, I'm not saying here to cast condemnation on anybody, or there are a lot of people that have been through some painful experiences that I've never been through. But the principle of this, of do not murder, is human life has intrinsic value. And then God is to be sovereign over all of human life. So think about this when God allows death or destruction or difficult things. I think about the words of Job. All of a sudden his family was just taken from him, wiped out. And I'm just trying to imagine what kind of faith it takes to say, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Boy, I don't know. Would I have the strength to say something like that? Would I say, what are you doing, Lord? Maybe I would. I don't know. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He was acknowledging God is sovereign. He's sovereign over all things. He's sovereign over human life. So I realize there are many, many other discussions and things we could delve into over this, but this is hopefully a good overview for you here with a few interruptions in the middle there over the sixth commandment, you shall not murder, and we will continue next week with commandment number 7.